Hi, this is Mikhail Klassen. I'm one of the co-authors of Mining the Social Web, 3rd edition. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick overview how to get up and running using a Docker image of all of the sample code that we include in our book. Okay, I'm just going to start by downloading a zip archive of the entire repository. Feel free to use the Git client that you might have installed if you're more comfortable doing that. Okay, once it's finished installing, I'm just going to unzip that file, and you'll see that here are the contents of the entire directory. Okay, the next step will be to download Docker. In the README for the repository, I include a link to the Docker Hub page where the different versions of the Docker desktop client are listed. So you'll see that they have the Docker desktop client for many different operating systems. Choose the one that suits yours. Since I'm working on a Mac right now, I'm going to visit the Docker desktop for Mac page. You'll need to create an account on the Docker Hub website to download the client, but that should take only a few minutes. Since I already have the client installed, I'm not going to show you how installation works, but you should be able to do that without any difficulties. One thing to be aware of is that if you are using an older version of the Mac OS operating system, you may have to install the Docker Toolbox instead, rather than the current version of the Docker desktop client. So I'm going to run the Docker app just to make sure that it's going. You should see here a little Docker icon that is loading. The client is currently starting. We'll just wait a few more seconds for that to finish. Okay, so when the Docker desktop is done loading, I want you to go and open up your terminal. Type docker space -- version, and you should see the Docker version number and build. This means that the Docker client has been installed and is working properly. Okay, so still in your terminal, navigate to where you downloaded that zip archive. All right, here is the repository. The top level of the repository contains a Docker file. That Docker file is a recipe that tells Docker how to build the Docker image that you're going to run. So if you want to build that image yourself, type docker build, and then we're going to tag it MTSW3E for Mining the Social Web, 3rd edition. And then we put a trailing period at the end, which indicates that the Docker file is in this directory. Okay, so that built very quickly, and that's because I have previously already built this image. If this is the first time that you are building this image on your machine, it's going to take quite a while for this process to complete, and that's because it has to download all the different dependencies, all the different Python libraries, the Java development kit. All these different things need to be downloaded and this image built. So give it some time, let it finish building, and then we can move on. Alternatively, if you would rather just download a pre-built image, I include instructions for that in the README as well. So that would enable you to just download a pre-built image from the Docker Hub and proceed from there. Now I'll warn you, it's a fairly large image, several gigabytes in size, so if that is something you want to do, make sure you have enough bandwidth available and a fairly fast internet connection. Okay, so with that image built, I can type docker image ls, and these are the different Docker images on my machine, and the first one there, MTSW3E, is the image for this repository. Okay, next we're going to use Docker Compose. What Docker Compose allows you to do is run multiple Docker images simultaneously and coordinate them. So the other image that we want to run in a Docker container is MongoDB. MongoDB is an open source NoSQL document store, a database, and we use that in chapter 9 of our book to do some of the Twitter examples. So we pull data from Twitter and we store it in MongoDB, and we show you how to do that in chapter 9. So in order to have a Docker, in order to have a MongoDB instance running at the same time, we isolate that in its own Docker container and we run that in a coordinated way with our own. If that all sounds complicated, just don't worry about it. Type Docker Compose and then the word up. This will make sure that you have both of those images. If you don't have MongoDB, it will download it automatically for you. And if everything runs correctly, you should see something like this. And down here, it's you're given the URL that you need in order to access the Jupyter Notebook server. A couple of comments here. With the current version of Jupyter, when it runs inside a Docker container, it will give you the host name of that Docker container as one of two links, two URLs where you can go to access the Jupyter server. Now that's not going to work for us because we're accessing the container from the outside over port 8888. So just copy this latter part here that uses localhost, and then go back into your browser and paste that in the search bar. We're going to delete that closing bracket, and when we hit enter, we can now see the Jupyter Notebook server, and if we click on the notebooks directory, we see all of the different Jupyter notebooks of our book. So from here, you can click on any one of these notebooks and follow along with the sample code. All right, I hope that was helpful. Have fun.